Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of the Encounter Sounds podcast. This is your host, Rudi Ribeiro, Jr., and I have here my two dear friends, Tyler England and Taylor Ford. And I feel like the Lord put in my heart to talk about, some of the behind the scenes of what's happening here. We are all part of, for those that don't know us, we are all part of the Homestead Mobile here in Alabama under Apostle Damon Thompson. And God has been doing some amazing things, not just now, but in the past 5 years for me, 6 years for me, you guys much longer. And I think you'll be important maybe to share with other artists, other musicians, other worship teams, a little bit of how we got here, what God is doing, how he's moving, and our personal experiences in transitioning here, and maybe be an inspiration to other creatives. And I think as for this first episode, it would be great to maybe have a little background on each one of us, how we got here and how we met. And I think it would be great, maybe Tyler, you can go first and share a little bit of what's in your heart and a little bit of your background.
I think I can pass a background check. I'm pretty sure I can. Yeah, man, I'm thankful to be doing this. And it's just fun what we're getting to do. Yeah. But a little background, just for sake of conversation. Man, how far are we going back? Let's see.
It's true.
I'm from West Virginia, originally from West Virginia, grew up there, had a real musical and just amazing family growing up. My mom and dad and aunts and uncles and all that, they were in a Southern gospel group. They traveled all through the 80s, late 70s through the 80s I think they stopped probably about, 92, 93, something like that. Everybody started having kids, and kids started getting older, and it was just way too difficult. But they traveled for years. They were called the Soul Revelators.
Come on.
And so, they traveled all around West Virginia and like Eastern Kentucky, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio. They traveled that whole circuit there for forever. So have that kind of as my roots, which is, it's really cool. I've got I was helping a buddy of mine whose parents were also in that group unpack the other day, and he had an old 8-track that they cut in they cut that thing in like 78 maybe, give or take, something like that. Yeah, my dad with hippie long hair on the front, and my uncle looking hilarious on the front of it. But yeah, so that's pretty cool, like to be raised up with that all around. I was obviously I was born in 88, so I don't remember traveling a ton. I can remember going to some churches and stuff. But they kind of quit by the time that I was kind of coming of age. But you still felt the musicality in the family at large. It was always a thing. Holidays, it was a thing. And so just super cool background there. I have one brother, an older brother, and he's kind of the same. He's real musical, and he may even pop in on this thing at some point in time. But yeah, so raised kind of in a house with music all around, deep roots in the family. My grandfather was a pastor in the Church of God for he pastored probably 50 plus years before he finally retired, like 55 years. So amazing. So I'm really thankful to kind of have that heritage attached to my foundation. Yeah. Yeah, so that's really cool. But also, as growing up, we had a real musical household. I started playing keys when I was, I've always told people I started playing when I was 10. Really, we started finagling with instruments a lot earlier than that, but 10 is when I kind of picked it up, and then I never really went away from it. It stuck at that point, and that instrument stuck at that point. But not only was the household really musical and things like that, but I was raised in a house that really my folks were just they genuinely loved God, and they hungry for revival, and so they would go out of their way to like get us in those environments. So I can just recall like encounters with God at really, really early age, and so that that would have been late 90s. So we were really impacted by what was happening at Brownsville. I was really impacted by that as a kid. Lyndall Cooley was like a hero to me as a young man, and obviously because he was amazing and he was a piano player. Yeah. So, so he was a hero to me for years, still is. But yeah, they went out of their way to like get us in those environments, and it just really marked us and made us hungry for the things of God, that gave us a hunger for the things of God that still lingers and exists to this day. We lived too far away. Brownsville was in Pensacola. We were in West Virginia. So like in 1997, well, that's a long ways away. It's a long ways away now, but back then, that would have been probably what? That'd been 20 pages deep of MapQuest directions there. There ain't no doubt about it, because you ain't GP. There ain't no TomTom out yet.
That's exactly right.
You ain't using Apple Maps for that trip. No, you're printing them off.
Yes.
On your Windows 95 computer.
Oh yeah.
But Pensacola just seemed so far away back in those days. So we, but what Brownsville would do is they would do these events, and I'm sure people probably remember them. But they would do events called Awake America, and they'd done those for probably, I don't know, at least 2 years, probably 3 years. One of their most popular records was one of the most popular albums they put out was an Awake America live in Dallas. Wow. It was one of the most popular ones that come out during the revival. But they would do Awake Americas, and so we never made it to Pensacola because it just was far. But we made it to several of those, and so my folks always made sure that we were in those environments. If it was stirring, they were going to try to get us there. They kind of helped lead the youth, our youth group and things like that. So we would take, entire charter buses full of people to these, Awake America events. I can remember going to, I think we went to 3. I remember going to 3 of them, and man, they were just so impactful. Like that was probably some of my earliest memories with genuinely seeing people like encounter God and be just overwhelmed by God. Yeah. And just like, even in a sense of just like practical manifestation of the Spirit and things like that. That's probably some of my earliest memories of that. But man, just really marking a little period there. Also in that period of time, there was some stuff swirling in Columbus, Ohio at World Harvest Church. The year of Jubilee was swirling up there around 1998. So we made a bunch of trips to Columbus to Dominion Camp Meeting, pastors, Raise the Standard Pastors and Church Workers Conference. I remember my dad going to those, him and another leader at the church. They would travel up there, and then even later, my brother would go to Bible college there for a couple of years at World Harvest Bible College around 2000, 2001 too. But I'm talking like me and my brother, we're teenagers, and our family vacation is pile in the green Mercury Villager minivan, clothes rack on the back. Our summer vacation, Dominion Camp Meeting at World Harvest Church. We wasn't wearing swimming trunks. We literally, the whole back would be on. There was a clothes rack. It'd be lined up with suits. That was back when you wore suits to church.
Oh yes, sir.
And we would wear. That was our vacations. Not every year. We went to the beach. We had fun. But honestly, like, we loved it. Like, my brother and I, we wasn't like, oh my God, we're going to Dominion Camp Meeting for vacation. What? Yeah, no, we were like, let's go to Dominion Camp. We were fired up about it. We're like, who's going? TD Jakes is going to be there. Marvin Winans is going to be there. No doubt. Donnie McClurkin's going to be there. Yeah, you better know. You better know we're going. But man, that was a really fun time too, and back then. So, anyways, all that just saying, like, really thankful for how I was brought up, in a sense of my folks just really were passionate about getting us in an environment where we were experiencing the things of God. Yeah. And just very, very thankful for that. But so past my team, I don't know if we even wanted to go back this far, but we're there. We're there. We're there. We're there.
Go for it.
It's all good, man.
We're there.
Go for it.
I was pretty much teenage. Well, I was through the teenage years there, and I remember I started kind of, like I said, I kind of started playing around 10, and can remember Dad kind of giving me. I remember at early age. I'm just throwing thoughts out here coming into my brain, but I can remember literally for probably 2 years, my dad used to lead worship. My dad he went Fred Hammond style on it. My dad used to play bass and lead worship.
Come on.
And when I first started playing, I would play behind him on a piano, and he wouldn't even be on. It was completely turned off. But I'd play behind it. I'd done that for 2 years before, we put a little volume on it. And every now and then I can see him doing it to this day. When I finally got to get a little volume, every once in a while he'd turn around and he'd give me one of these. I'm getting a little loud. Getting a little rowdy back here, son. Turn it down a bit. But yeah. So he ended up giving me kind of the responsibility of I had a lot of friends that we were coming into this music thing together, and we were learning to play together, and we had a great little band to be just some teenagers in the middle of nowhere in Westford. When I tell you the middle of nowhere, it's the middle of nowhere. There is not a red light in the entire county. You got to drive an hour and a half to hit a red light. 45 minutes to Walmart. It's the middle of nowhere. We had a great little band and just great players, and we were all kind of coming into this together, so it was fun. But Dad ended up giving me the opportunity to kind of direct the band, kind of become what we would call a music director now. I don't know that we necessarily had those words back then. I think it was more so, son, just make sure they're practicing and they know what songs we're going to do. But I started doing that probably around 14 years old, something like that. And it was fun. We were just learning together, and very, very heavy gospel influence back in those days.
Oh yeah.
I grew up on gospel. I don't listen to it much anymore, or definitely don't play it much anymore, but back then I was gospel to the core. Yes, it probably still comes out in my playing a little bit just because it's so deeply rooted, but it's there. You just have to dig pretty deep for it nowadays. But so we all through teenage years was awesome. My mom and dad ended up starting a youth ministry when we were I was probably 16, 17 years old. It was called The Spot, and we would have services on Saturday nights, and it was just solely for it was just geared toward teenagers and college age kids, and God really, really met us there.
Come on.
I mean, it was incredible. That was a really, really marking period of my teenage years, kind of coming into the end of high school, into college. That was the thing that was happening, that was really stirring and cultivating encounters and things like that. It was that little renovated grocery store. And and the same for a lot. I have a lot. I even friends I'm close to today. That's that little period of time and that little place was huge for us as kids. Mm. I can remember like it was yesterday going down there. I would go down through the week and just go in there and pray. And I've been thinking about this recently, just with what's been swirling here, even with our kids here at the Homestead. So many of them going into the sanctuary just all through the week and of the evenings and stuff like that, just to pray and host presence. And I can remember doing that as a teenager at the Spot.
Yeah.
I would go down there at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, unlock the door, go in, turn on usually Jason Upton.
Yeah.
Back then.
No doubt.
And man, I can remember, I can remember what I felt tangibly to this day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Certain times at certain points during that period. Like I remember having encounters with angels in there, and man, it was just wild.
Amazing.
But yeah, so that place was special. You want me to keep going? We good?
Of course. Yeah. But one comment
yes.
that I think it's, you said, man, I remember those moments vividly, is one thing that I'm trying to learn, because we just had this transition from South Carolina here to Alabama, and just the memories we made in South Carolina are so vivid and special.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to stay more aware of the moments.
Yeah, for sure.
And like, man, this is really special.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it's not going to be like this forever.
Mm-hmm,
of course, we're going for things that are going to grow and better, but
yeah.
it's so special right now.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm trying to like, I need to value, I need to be present.
Oh, yeah.
Because we will remember this with, in our hearts.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
You're not going to forget.
I've always been like that. You got to slow down and honor exactly where you're at in that moment.
Right.
Yep.
Because what Abba is pouring on you in that moment, or even what he's asking of you in that moment, it's very likely that exact thing will never happen again.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that may be one time, and that might be a prolonged period. Like, I was thinking about that. Even it's cool you said that, because I had that thought. I carried that thought in my heart in this previous season we just had here, where we went wordless with our worship expression here.
Yeah.
We took almost pretty much the entire month of February, right?
January.
Almost the entire month of January, and we just completely removed the lyrics from our worship expression and our posture. And while we were in the middle of that, I just remember thinking, I'm like, I'm going to honor this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because this may never be asked of us again.
Yeah.
And maybe it will, maybe it won't. And even if it is, it won't be this exact thing, because there's even something about the initiation of something, or the first time you've done something. So every time we come in there, I was like, I'm going to honor every single moment and what unfolds in this, because it's a huge deal.
Yes.
It was so interesting, because as soon as he made that announcement, it was so weighty for me in my heart, because I'm like, hey, I play since I was 8 years old in church.
Yeah.
Very similar to your story.
Yeah.
And this has never happened.
Yeah.
Especially for us that play instruments, and especially me, like with the saxophone, you don't have many spaces to play in worship.
Yeah,
usually.
yeah.
You know, have to play a little bit here, a little bit there, and I'm like, I've never seen this happen before.
Yeah.
And everybody
Yeah.
have this posture of, we're just gonna go wordless. And even I was talking to I don't remember exactly who I was talking to. I think it was Pastor Brad Custer, and I felt like the Lord put this in my heart about that month, which is for us that are married. Tyler,
Watch it.
there's one thing that you know, that once you grow in intimacy with your wife and you get to know each other, there's those moments that you don't need words.
Yeah.
One look and you understand exactly what's happening or what the other person is thinking.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was like almost like the Lord saying, we're growing in intimacy where we don't even need words,
Yeah.
but we're getting to know each other more deep.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was a way that the Lord put in my heart to kind of understand what was happening.
Yeah.
You know, we are growing deeper in relationship, and maybe we don't need as many words to get to know each other deeper. So I thought it was a beautiful way that the Lord showed me that.
Yeah.
But it was very weighty and special
Mm-hmm.
to go through that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Definitely was.
But I think it'd be great to for you to kind of talk a little bit about how
Skip
you got
12 years.
No, don't skip 12 years.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Because you connected with Apostle Damon way, before any of us. I think you too, and
sure.
I think it would be great to maybe get there and then hear.
Yeah. So we stopped there, kind of those college years, and that's pretty much right out there is when it wasn't long after that I met him for the first time. So after I graduated high school, I went to college for one semester and quickly realized I went to college as a pre-dentistry major.
Come on. I didn't know that.
I don't know what I was thinking.
Man, praise God.
I don't know what I was thinking. I went one semester, got to the end of it. I remember having one quiz, and I got like a 34 on it. And I'm like, you know what? This probably ain't for me.
I'm good.
This probably ain't for me. I know how to make a G chord. That's how I can. Hey. But so I went to college for one semester. Anyway, I'll skip some of that stuff. But so I graduated in 2007, and in the fall of 2008, October of 2008, I had the opportunity just through not really through anything, honestly. Just some people may be familiar with a guy named Eddie James, and he's a phenomenal man. But he was rip roaring, traveling everywhere back in those days, even small towns in West Virginia. And he come to a church, and I remember just having I went up to him and had a conversation with him after the service, because I'd always had this thing in my heart where it's like you would love to do some form. I think every teenage musician probably has this. We're like, man, I would love to maybe do this for a living. Yeah. But coming from where I come from, and most people probably feel the same, you're like, I have no idea how to make that happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, but I just kind of, I didn't know him on any level. He just come to a church in our area, and I approached him after that service. And which is kind of even out of character for me, but I felt like I was supposed to. So I approached him after that service, and was just like, basically like, if there's ever any opportunity or whatever, I'm a musician, whatever, there's ever any opportunity, I'd love to maybe go on the road. And actually the first time he came, it was in June of 2008, and we had that conversation, and then I never heard back from him. And he come back in the end of September, actually, of that same year. We had a conversation again. He sent me an email about a week later, and I was I was carrying just like a random little job at a auto body shop at that time, and I remember getting on my BlackBerry.
Come on, look out.
I had email on that sucker.
Fired up.
I remember getting on there, and I seen that email, and I quit, which it wasn't like a super important job, but it was a job. Yeah. I remember quitting that job and getting on an airplane a week later.
Wow.
And I got on an airplane, and I flew to Birmingham. I didn't have a clue how long I was going to be gone for. I didn't know, like, are we going out for 2 weeks? Or are we going out for 2 months? Am I never coming back again? I had no clue. I just remember I was like, I'm going to put as much clothes as I can in this suitcase that's under 50 pounds, and we're getting out of here. But anyways, to shorten it up a little bit and get to what you was asking, I met him in I flew into Birmingham. He picked me up. And the very first place that we went was a place in Alabama called The Ramp. And I'd vaguely known about The Ramp, but I'd never been there. And that was the very first place that we went. And at that point in time, Apostle D was speaking there regularly. And that was the first time I really heard him speak, was when I showed up there after my flight to get on the road with Eddie. Then the first time I ever met him personally was about a month later, actually in Fresno, California. And we had traveled our first little leg when I was with Eddie there at the end of 2008. We hit like the Call San Diego happened that year, and some different things. And we went to a church in Fresno. We done the music and worship that night, and Apostle D spoke. And that was where I really met him. And then the following year, 2009, a bunch of folks that we're even connected to today, we moved to Hamilton, Alabama, and we were all just kind of a part of the Ramp at that period in time. So I moved in 2009. Bren moved in 2009. He was there. It was there where our relationship really began to cultivate. So I would say our relationship began to cultivate in 2009. And we spent lots of services and moments and encounters and all that stuff together throughout those years there in Hamilton. And he went on to move to South Carolina in around 2012, 13, something like that. But anyways, I ended up moving to South Carolina. I'll skip the longevity of that there, but I ended up moving to South Carolina in 2016. I remember hearing I was just kind of in a period in life where I was like, I felt a pull from Abba where the only language I had for it at that point in time was like, I know there's more. and I didn't know what that meant or what that looked like or where that looked like or where that was. I didn't have a clue. I just started making radical decisions based on faith and a whisper.
Yeah.
And I had no idea where it was going to end up. And I remember hearing the very first Wilderness Society podcast at the beginning of 2016. And it absolutely just wrecked my world and really sent me on a journey that I'm still on today. But I ended up moving to South Carolina, and then obviously honestly, I moved to South Carolina to greater connect with Apostle D.
Yeah.
And I'll say unapologetically, that is the only reason I moved to South Carolina.
Yeah.
I didn't move there for any type of, I wasn't offered a position. I barely even knew what Hope Chapel was. I barely knew what Carolina Revival was. There was no, I'm going to step into this role even on the radar. When I moved to South Carolina, I moved there to greater connect with him. And then obviously things unfolded. And I had the great honor of getting to later join the staff there and help lead the kind of worship creative expression inside of Carolina Revival. But that's really where our relationship really began to take deep root. Yeah. It had, we had known each other, and it had been cultivating in years past, so now, if I say how long I've actually known him, was it 15 years?
Wow.
From at least when we first met and began cultivating a relationship. But yeah, so, based on that reason and just the honor that I have in my heart for him, when this stuff started swirling last year, really basically this time last year, we're probably almost, if I look at the calendar, we're probably almost, what's weird is probably we're almost sitting on the day, probably
no doubt about it.
It would be wild if we were.
I'm afraid of looking because usually it's right there, right?
If I looked at it would be weird, but it wouldn't surprise me because it was about this time for sure.
Yeah.
Where I was sitting in the we had just renovated and made a beautiful studio space, an awesome studio in South Carolina that we were just starting to really use. We actually recorded 2 projects there this time last year that are not out yet. We still haven't released them. We'll get around to it at some time, but I remember we had just finished that studio project, and I was fired up about it. But I remember I was sitting in the studio one day just doing some stuff. It was on a Tuesday. Probably March 11th, if we looked or not, I'm not sure. Yeah. But I was sitting in the studio on a Tuesday, and he called and let me know what the conversation he and Apostle Aaron had just had, and there was no other answer in my heart than, of course, yes. Yeah. Yes, I will go, and it'll be the great honor of my life to be able to come down there and help steward what's now unfolding here at the Homestead. So hopefully that answers that a little bit.
It's awesome, man. Yeah. There's just so much that I didn't know.
Same,
right?
Yeah.
We've been walking together for a while now, and it's so good to see that journey.
Yeah.
Taylor.
Yes, sir.
I think, it's so funny how our stories are so similar in so many ways.
Yeah.
And but you also grew up in a musical family, so it'd be awesome to hear a little bit of your background.
A real musical family. Taylor's musical family, they were a little more professional than mine. Yeah. My family was more like low-key indie. He was like, they were like one step from the Gaithers.
Yeah.
Professional recording at 7.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Literally, that's almost like my mom's story. Is my mom started playing piano. My grandfather basically put her behind the piano at 9 and was like, figure it out. I need somebody to play. You know what I mean? But I'm sort of the new kid on the block in a lot of ways. In some ways not, but sort of being with you guys all the time. I did not live in South Carolina. I grew up in a little town right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, called China Grove, and there was the town right next to it was Kannapolis. And that's where my grandfather established a church well over 50 years ago now. And he pastored that church for 40 years. Previously, he pastored a church in Chattanooga, and he lived right outside of Chattanooga in Ooltewah. Great little town, great little area. And there were some people in North Carolina that said he was born and raised in North Carolina, but he had moved to Tennessee to pastor, went to Tennessee Temple, and all those things. And they called him and said, hey, we want you to come back. They called him in like the latter end of 1971, early 1972. And they said, you know, we greatly desire a church to be established here. And so he said yes, and my grandmother said yes begrudgingly. She loved the house they had in Tennessee, the life they had. It was amazing. But he obeyed the voice of the Lord, and I'm thankful, or else, you know, who knows if I would be here. And so he moves back, establishes what was called Truth Temple in 1972. My grandfather was one of the first few men outside of Oral Roberts and Billy Graham to be on television, even prior to coming back to North Carolina in the 60s. In the 50s and 60s, going to New York to record, and he had a program and a group called the 11th Hour, and was on television for many years. So television was sort of always in my veins, and equally so radio as well. Mm-hmm. My parents had 2 Southern gospel radio stations for the past 40 years now. So a lot of this stuff, like, there's so many things that flow through my veins. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know. Half the time you're like, what do I choose? Where do I go here? Like, my God, I could do radio, music. It's like, but it's a blessing. And so anyway, my grandfather established that church and pastored for 40 years. We were on television called The Moment of Truth. And I grew up on television. You know what I mean? I grew up I tell people this story. It is true. My family was so musical, and I knew that. But I knew I could sing from an early age, but I didn't tell anybody I could, because I knew how much we were at the church. And I knew how, if anybody knows.
Don't let Papa fall.
Oh, if Papa finds out, I'm going to be there every night. You know what I mean? And he didn't care about school, none of that. You're going to be at the church. And I was already there enough, but I got to play. I was like, I don't want to break into my playtime here.
Too much responsibility. Yeah, too much responsibility.
Too much. I want to run around and be sweaty with the other kids. I don't want to do all that singing and stuff.
So you were supposed to be the original Justin Bieber?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, early age, and I started singing, you know, back then. I don't know if this was the same for you, Ty, or even for you, Rudy. Back then, our big thing, my grandfather's big thing, was he loved all styles of music, loved it all. So we had everything from trios to quartets to choirs to soloists. Like, we had so many expressions of styles of music. And I grew up loving all styles of music because of that. I loved Southern gospel. I cut my teeth on that. I loved black gospel. I loved anything in related to church. I loved all of it. Because we were exposed to all of it. My grandfather called in other churches from other backgrounds, other areas, different ministers. He never really, and I'm thankful for this, he never really boxed himself in, and especially didn't box us into what he exposed us to. Yeah. And I'm grateful for that, because it made me who I am. So I started singing in a little group that we had called just the Youth Choir, or Team Truth, we called it for a little time.
I love that.
And it was some type of acrostic that I don't remember what it stood for now, but Team Truth. And then I was probably 12, almost 13, and somebody was given a vocal part for a song. Do you remember the song by Mary Mary, Shackles? Take the shackles off my feet. Yeah, right?
I hope this is going toward you singing it.
Yeah, so there was a little bit of a disagreement. Couldn't figure out the first verse, and I got frustrated at 12. I was like, I'll do it. Just give me the verse. Everybody was like, can he even really sing? Like, you know what I mean? And so I did that first verse, and that was the first time I ever really sang on that Shackles song. And there is a recording of it somewhere.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm not giving it to anybody at this table.
I would pay money for
that. I know you would, you know. And so that was sort of my first moment, if you will. And then from there, you know, again, you let people know. And then it was like I was in 32 different groups after that. You know what I mean? We were at the church. I mean, too, even growing up, being on television, you know, we were there Sunday morning. You know, you went to Sunday school. There was Sunday school. There was church service. Then there was Sunday night church. Then Monday night, a lot of times you had off. You had Tuesday night practice. You had Wednesday night prayer meeting. / taping. You taped for television. And then Thursday night tapings. Then Friday nights we usually had off because of high school football. Then Saturdays, the 4,000 groups that we had at the church, they all practiced on Saturday, and we called it Super Saturday Practice, where you were literally there for 5 hours. And it was just, we ran through all of the groups, all the songs we were going to do, and just rinse and repeat every week. And so that was kind of my story. But it's cool because, obviously it was very tiring, but I don't look back on that and go, phew. I actually look back on that with fond memories and go, I was at the church all the time. And when I got my license, I was given a key, and very similar. Like, I used to love going up there to pray and to just hang out. I mean, that was really a home away from home. And it was a property in Kannapolis that my grandfather, a really cool story, just briefly. Basically, the Lord told him it was his property. He started clearing it off before he ever purchased it. The man who owned the property pulled up, saw him on a bobcat just tearing down trees, going, "What are you doing? That's my land." And he was like, and my grandfather's, whose name was Pastor Garland Fall, he actually passed away in December of 2021. And he told the man, "No, God told me it was my property." And the man looked at him. I'm sort of paraphrasing, but you owe me $30,000 and you got like 2 weeks to give it to me, or I'm going to take you to court. So he told the small group that wanted him to come back to North Carolina in 1972 and told them, we need $30,000. And in that 2 weeks, the Lord came through, raised the money, bought the property, and the rest was history. And so I grew up with a very rich musical family. I mean, you even say, like, there's an element of professionalism even to my family. I mean, you got people like Pastor Bren Waddell. You've got Britt Nicole. You've got people that are in your line that you're like, I mean, what am I going to do? Well, they seem to be doing it just fine. What role do I play? Yeah. And so, I progressing over the years, being on television, and being on television was a lot of fun too when you went to school, because people found out you were on television. They watched you on a Sunday night, and then all day Monday at school, you're just getting teased like, oh, that's the church that jumps and shouts, and And again, thankful for my background, because we used to lovingly call ourselves Baptist-Costals, meaning we were very Baptist roots, but Pentecostal a lot of ways in certain expressions, and some not, but in some ways we were. Yeah. And so I grew up with a very rich, like sort of outside of the box view of what Christian life was. And I look back on that now, and I'm very grateful for that I was exposed to all of that. And then you go in the later years, and we ended up going to Pensacola. I don't remember what the services were called. It was a
Branded by Fire.
Branded by Fire. Yeah. And I remember my life being completely changed,
which was affiliated with Brownsville.
That's correct. Yeah. That's correct. It was at Brownsville, and it was just amazing. I couldn't even tell you how that impacted me now. I just know that it did, because we didn't have a grid for it, and so we came back from that, and that's when the culture of our church really changed, because there was now this hunger in people our age that people were like, "What is going on?" You know what I mean? And we started doing more, what you would call contemporary. And that was sort of what set my life on that journey. Well, fast forward, talking about to the Ramp, obviously, I attended Ramp. I mean, the Ramp did, the end of the year, winter ramps and did New Year's ramps and all those things. And all of those services that I was able to go to and be a part of, I wasn't a part of it as far as I was experiencing it. And it changed my life. And I remember one in particular. And this honestly is probably one of those moments you can look back and go, that changed. That was a defining moment. And it was 2009 in Chattanooga, which is so weird how the Lord works. Chattanooga, where my grandfather pastored, had a church there. And in 2009, actually my wife and I, Carly, my current wife, who we were dating, but we were broken up at the time. And I had a lot of things going on in my life. You think your life as a teenager, you're just distraught. Things are not going the way it's planned, and it's like, oh my God, your life's amazing. Like, good Lord. If you could look back on your past self and be like, you're going to get through it. I promise. God's good. And so I was going through a lot at the time, and I remember it was a massive, like the Civic Center or something like that.
Convention Center
in Chat. Huge room, concrete floor. Massive room, probably 8,000 to 10,000 people's whereabouts were in that room. And a lot of people, Eddie James was there, Perry Stone was there, like huge, ramp worship, all that. And I remember being in the back of the room, and this had never happened to me. I had moments throughout my life where God visited me, but in almost tame ways. But this, I got slammed to the floor is the only way I know, and I felt glued to the floor, and I was almost like in a fetal position on the ground, shaking. And people around me were like scared. They had no idea what was happening to me. And that was the first time, one or two times, to be honest, in my life that I heard the audible voice of the Lord. And you want to talk about the fear of the Lord. It was like, I have no idea what's going on, but I know somewhat. And I remember almost like it lifting, and I'm sitting up, and there was a puddle of like tears and sweat because I felt like I was literally on fire. And I sat up, and I was 21 at the time, or 20 or 21, and my life was forever changed. And I knew right then and there, the only language I had for it at the time was ministry. But I knew right then and there that I wasn't wired for a 9-to-5 job. There's nothing against that. I'm just saying I knew that wasn't in me. Yeah. I knew that there was a calling, if you will. Again, language that you knew at the time, an anointing. And I knew that there was something special. And at that time, I knew Pastor Bryn Waddell. Many of you may know, you may not, but we're family. But I never saw him as that. I always saw him as a man of God, someone. I never thought of him as like my blood relation. I thought of him as a superhero. Still do. And he was my all-time favorite worship leader. He was, you guys, even the way you guys used to play back in the ramp days always inspired me because, you would go to the ramp and hear songs, and people used to always say this, and you'd go back and try to find it, and you're like, oh, that is terrible. They did it way better, And so that kind of inspired me even to like how I approached music. And I knew then and there, too, at that same ramp that I was supposed to be connected to Pastor Bryn Waddell. And I didn't know how that was going to happen because obviously everybody was at the ramp. God was moving. I was like, he's never coming home, And then Apostle Damon moves, and Pastor Bryn comes back home, back to North Carolina, and late 2012 takes over for my grandfather in 2013. My grandfather had pastored there 40 years. Pastor Bryn took over. And I was actually at another church at the time. I was a youth pastor, which is hilarious. I did not feel called to do.
Pastor Taylor.
Oh, my gosh. It was hilarious. But though that church, it was probably a church of 500 or 600 people, which in our town was like, hey, they're moving. You know what I mean? They're moving and shaking over there. And the Lord told me to take the position. I had no idea why, but I knew I was supposed to. And so I was there about a year and a half, and I was making at the time, I don't know how old I was, probably 24, 25, something like that. At the time, I was making good money. I'm like, man, I'm in ministry, so technically on paper, this is as good as it gets. I'm like, I don't have to do a normal 9-to-5. I get to sing and do all those things and sort of minister, maybe teach from time to time. And I remember walking into my office as plain as day, and the Lord said, okay, it's time to go. And I knew exactly what he meant. And I didn't even sit down in my chair. I turned around out of my office. I walked right into the lead pastor's office at that church and was like, I'm turning in my 30-day notice. And it was hard on him because I think that there was an element, and this is not about speaking highly of me, but I think that he appreciated me because a lot of his family, even his son, they didn't really care about the ministry. And so he having someone like me around him, helping him, like it was like a breath of fresh air. So me leaving hurt him. And it hurt me too because I was just trying to obey the Lord. And I didn't know anybody at that time could get mad about that, and it was nothing against him at all. Obviously, he was an amazing man, and I'm so thankful for my time there. So I left, but the Lord didn't tell me where I was going. Now, Pastor Bryn had been leading a little over a year, changed the name to City Revival Church, and I'll speed this up a little bit. Sorry, but basically he had been leading, and the church was getting out of financial debt, so there was not really a way that the church could take me on at the time. I don't have a college degree. I was terrible in high school. I barely got out of it. I'm pretty sure they just passed me so I wouldn't come back. You know what I mean? So and my mind doesn't think that way. I'm a very hands-on type individual, so I thought it would be a waste of money for me to go to college. And I was probably right. And so I didn't have a degree. I had a lot of, growing up, that's what I was saying, like even being in radio, my parents having radio stations, I have a lot of skills, but nothing that I can technically quantify or prove. There was a lot of things in me that I was good at. I knew that I could use, but I didn't know how to do it. And so I took like a secretary job somewhere in town because I couldn't. At the time, the economy was kind of weird, so nobody was hiring. I tried to get a job at a radio station in Charlotte. They loved me, but me not having a college degree hurt me. So it was like in all these ways, it was like nothing was working. I was like, Lord, you told me to quit. At the time, Carly and I weren't married too long, a few years, and we were about to have our first child. And it was like, I got to find something, and so I worked for a little while, and I would go to the church. I asked Pastor Bryn for a key, and I did nothing at the time. It was like a couple of months where I didn't do anything. And I just went, and I would clean and spend time and pray. I wasn't getting paid at all. I would clean and do what I could do. I was putting my skill set to use, making things better, cleaning up some wires, making the sound better, doing different things, asking him if he needed anything. I knew I was supposed to be connected to him. Mm-hmm. And you'll learn this about me. My wife and I crack up because my love language is gift giving. So like the way that I express to people that I love them in a lot of ways is to do something for them. So that was me in my own way trying to get connected to him and there and show him like, I love you for you. I don't care about what you do or what you can do for me. I just want to be here, Mm-hmm. And so fast forward for 10 years, I served alongside with Pastor Bryn and as my spiritual father, and it was an amazing time. And I mean, you want to talk about the importance of spiritual fathers. I think people say, yeah, but I'm telling you, it is so significant. It changed my life. It turned me from a boy, frankly, who barely ironed his shirts and barely had his hair fixed and, had a very, skewed look on life to someone who thought better of themselves, who thought like I need to posture myself better. And even from the perspective of, I mean, you talk about one of the greatest worship leaders of all time, and people used to always say like, oh my gosh, like what is it like leading worship for Pastor Brent? But I never thought of it like that. He was so kind and loving and caring, and he never taught me how to lead worship. He just taught me things of the kingdom. And those things naturally took root in me. And then those things began to impact the way I led worship. Wow. And so, people go, oh man, did he teach? And it's like, no, he didn't. He taught me how to be a man. He taught me how to love the Lord with all of my heart. And that was all that mattered. He was like, you seek the Lord, you be a good husband, you be a good father, and everything else will take care of itself. And he was right. And so in 2021, my grandfather actually passed away in December of 21. And then not but 2 or 3 months later, Pastor Bryn calls me and says, hey, Apostle Damon, I just got off the phone with him a couple of days ago. I've been trying to process it. Is moving to Mobile, and I'm going to be moving as well. Well, before he got any further, in my mind, I'm like, well, I'm packing my stuff. I mean, this is done. I don't care. I'm going no matter what. I don't care. If it's like, hey, do you need somebody to clean the toilets? I'll do it with the best of them. I just knew I was coming. Yeah. And then to my surprise, what the second thing that came out of his mouth was, Apostle Damon wanted to know if you would come as well. And I was so flabbergasted. I was honored, obviously, but I was like, are you sure? Did you hear that right? Or like, come on, And so I was honored, because a few times before I had come to, we did Carolina Revival in North Carolina and South Carolina, at CRC, where I had led with you guys before, doing some of the monthly meetings, maybe not every month, but probably, 5 or 6 times a year.
Yeah, for sure.
There have been a couple times I filled in for Matt and Paige when they had their one of their kids.
One of the kids.
Yeah, one of their 12 children. You know what I mean? They're truly a tribe.
One of them.
And
which was once a year most of the time.
So, just added that to coming. And so I was exposed to it a little bit, but I wasn't really as connected as I would have wanted to be to Apostle. That's to no one's fault, his or the other. It was just, I was kind of a guest kind of thing, which was great. I was honored to do that. So to then be like, now I'm going to get to be around him all the time was like, man, what an honor. And so, You know, I don't have the story of having great moves. To be honest, I spent my entire life in North Carolina. I'm 34 years old. I was born in 88 as well. And I don't have any of those where I had to move or do anything. All of my life in North Carolina. So to pack my entire family up, which, by the way, my wife, Carly, been married to her for 10 years, and I have 2 girls, Lillian, who is 8, EJ, who's 5.5. And so to pack them up in a U-Haul and drive away from my family, and I mean, well established. I mean, my parents have a tremendous radio ministry of which I help them with. I'm on the radio every day. And my dad was a North Carolina senator, helped him in a lot of ways with that. And even all the family and friends that I had established over the years at CRC, my grandfather's church, leaving that, being there all my life was a big, big, big move. But when Pastor Bryn made that call, I had to apologize to him later because I felt like I said yes so quick. You know what I mean? You know, but I just, in the 6 months prior to that, and then I'll be done, I promise. The 6 months prior to that, Carly and I were experiencing really difficult time. Not in our marriage, just our life was amazing. Our finances were awesome. Everything on paper was amazing. You know, and I don't mean like we were experiencing difficulties as in, you know, oh, we're fighting. It was none of that. Our lives were amazing. But something was missing. And I knew, you know, it's as vague as it sounds, and I know people can say this, but I knew something was coming. And when he said that, it was like an immediate, like, this is it. Yeah. This is it. And so we moved down here in Mobile in June. And I've never been so hot in my life.
Amen.
And so for those few months of summer, I was like, whew.
We all moved in the heat of summer.
Oh, and I was like, Lord, did I make the right decision? You know what I mean? You know?
And rain.
Rain.
Every day for the first 2 weeks when I moved.
Oh,
that scared me.
Yeah, I need a boat because it's raining so much. And so it's a lot of that to say, like, you know, just over those years, even being connected to Apostle Damon now would not be possible without Pastor Bryn. I would have never had those quote-unquote connections or the ability to do that without him. And so, frankly, I just want to take a second to honor him because I wouldn't be anything that I am or where I am without him. And it'll be hard for me not to get teary-eyed. But the importance of someone in your life that you have as a spiritual father and that spiritual role to be like, you know, all those years, it makes all of those years and things that you submit to someone make sense. Yeah. And you're like, this is why people like this in your life are important. Because you never know that a decade later, you could be a part of such an amazing move of God that would have never been possible if I wouldn't have said yes and if he wouldn't have said yes to me. Yeah. And I'm grateful for that. And being as connected as I am to this move of God and having the privilege to help lead, which it'll never be lost on me how amazing this truly is. And being with you guys is a dream come true, but it would not be possible without Pastor Bryn. Yeah. And having the privilege to be connected to Apostle Damon is a dream. And I love being here, and I love this family. I love you guys, and I'm very, very thankful and honored. And that's really, I have learned that as long as I'm thankful and as long as gratefulness resonates in my heart, I'm going to be just fine.
Amazing, man.
Yeah.
Amazing story.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have to tell you, when I heard the news, of course, it was a shock. Tyler, we had a meeting. Starbucks.
That Starbucks.
It wasn't pretty.
That Baseburg Starbucks.
Pretty. I was so mad that day. My goodness. But when he told me that Pastor Bryn and you were going, I'm like, no, that's not true. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
You know, knowing that I didn't know much of the history, but knowing it was your grandfather's church.
Yeah.
And the legacy and, you know, and leaving all that to come here was like weighty. Yeah. You know, and how much you guys love that place and, you know, how much work you put into, you know, making that church better and grow. So, and a lot of my first experiences playing with them actually was in North Carolina, so I love that.
Oh, that's right.
Was that not too long after?
Yeah, I played a couple times.
That's right.
Just spontaneous when Apostle called, but then right after when Matt we went to North Carolina. I actually played bass one time there.
That's
I
right.
do remember that.
I saw a picture
that.
of that the other day. That's
Oh, really?
right. Yeah.
I do remember that.
Yeah, you don't want to hear that. Don't find that recording.
That would have been just because we went there a couple times, like for our like kind of like a turn of the year type event, right?
Yep.
Right. Yep.
And we done that a couple times pre the 2020 type like swirl. We got in there for like 3 months.
Yeah, the 2019
yeah.
were the first
2019,
big one we did
2020.
in 2020.
That's the one that lasted like.
But we did
2 months.
the
Yeah, 2 or 3
2018.
months.
That was the one that I played the first time. There
Amazing.
in 2018.
Now that was 2018, 2019. I don't know.
Yeah, but
The last 5 years are a blur.
Yeah. There's no doubt.
Thank you, COVID. Thank you, COVID. I try to think back, and I'm like, there's just 2 years are missing.
Oh, there's no
2
doubt.
years are blurry. They're
Completely.
great. But
Yeah.
I just can't put my finger on
Yeah.
anything that happened.
It's a glitch in my
It's
memory
somewhere
core.
there.
Yeah.
it is. But yeah, I'll share a little bit of my story.
Yeah, I was going to
Please,
say,
come on.
you're the host, but you got to, we're asking the question.
Yeah,
Rudy was
so-
playing saxophone from the time he was 3.
Yeah.
Well, as you can notice, I do have an accent.
It's from Boston.
I grew up in Brazil, so I will say a lot of wrong words. The accents, my kids will make fun for me. Not all the words come to mind when I need them. It's terrible, but just hang in there. I apologize ahead of time.
Go, man.
I told Sylvia, my wife, hey, if they need a translation, I'm calling you. Translate to real English.
Oh, that's so good.
But I grew up in Brazil, also a very musical family. My dad taught me the acoustic guitar when I was 7 years old. All my uncles and cousins, everybody plays. And some of them are professional musicians today. Amazing piano player that I have a cousin that lives in Europe. I have another cousin that plays the saxophone. Amazing saxophone player. And there are many others that play. My dad recorded when he was a kid. When he was 11, he recorded the vinyl on a vinyl.
Wow.
Very interesting voice, high pitch.
Love that.
And so grew up in church, Assemblies of God. Started playing the piano when I was 8 years old. And then at 10, I picked up the saxophone. My church had it was funny, the Assemblies of God in Brazil when I was young, they had like marching bands in the church.
Wow.
So the hymns, we would sing hymns with a marching band.
That's wild.
Imagine how loud that was.
Wow.
And actually, when I first joined, I played the cymbals.
Wow.
And then until I kind of learned the saxophone, then I started playing the saxophone. And it was much more fun when I started playing the saxophone because I started playing classical piano. And the very first few years of classical piano, it feels like you don't know anything.
Yeah.
It takes forever for you to kind of really start playing some fun things. And then the saxophone was a lot more fun. And we ended up having like a big band in the church. And that's when I started falling in love with like jazz and even had a big band there before I moved here for a couple of years. It was a lot of fun. Big bands were my thing. I remember I had a teacher that gave me a recording of Harry Connick Jr. on a VHS. And I think I watched that thing like 50 times. I just loved that kind of sound. So I put this big band together for a couple of years. We did like rearrangements of hymns and things like that. It was a lot of fun. Probably like one of the most fun times I had as a musician in my life. But when I was 19 years old, I lived very close to the church, and this lady came to preach in a conference in our church. It wasn't a big church, maybe 200 people. My whole life, my 19 years until that point, I always served in that church. My parents served in that church when they were young. And she came to preach, and she stayed in my house because it was the closest house to the church. It would be easier for her to go to church from there. And I remember we were having coffee, and she asked me about what I was doing, about my life, and I was like, hey, I'm having the time of my life. I do music full time. That's my passion. I go to music school. I work for an orchestra. I have an orchestra myself. I serve at the church as a music director. It's just a blast. Yeah. And she's like, well, I'm happy you like that, but the Lord is taking you to a different country. And that was like June 1999. Within 6 months, I was here.
Wow.
It just like a turnaround, really crazy turnaround. We sold everything, packed our bags, and came. And man, arriving in a different country, no job, didn't speak English.
You were like, what, 20?
I was 19 years old.
19.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was January of 2000.
Yeah.
We arrived in Massachusetts, cold, winter, miserable. But everything is new. It's like having a chance to start over is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Especially at that age
Sure.
where, you're coming to the United States. It's a dream of everybody that don't live in the United States to come to the United States. And I tell everybody, you have no idea how good this place is. I love America. And I was excited. But at the same time, my whole life, friends, everybody stayed behind. Just my parents, brother, sister, and an aunt came. And you just start from scratch. I don't know anything. Don't speak English. Just go get a job, And but things unfolded. I moved to a city near Boston. There was a big Brazilian community and a big Brazilian church that had a little bit of a revival influenced by Brownsville as well. So which is crazy that all the three of us kind of had that influence. Yeah. And that was my first exposure to revival, let's say. Mm-hmm. And for a few years was really great. Was like getting that exposure and hunger and being hungry for God was just amazing moments in the presence of God. So many hours spent praying and just staying overnight and just experience that presence. Yeah. But things didn't end up well at some point. I transitioned and from after I left that church, kind of moved around a little bit, different churches. And as a musician, also there's always people calling you and just wanting you to play, not really caring about you or what you do or how you're doing. And I started getting tired of that. You experience like you're hungry for God, you experience revival, and then you start going back to regular church, and it doesn't, almost like you don't fit anymore. Yeah, and just having pastors wanting you because of your talent, not because of you, also was it became tiring, exhausting. And I remember around. When was that? Around 2011, I think, or 2009. I remember was my brother. I joined a church in 2009. Stayed there for 4 years, and I remember my brother gave me a book by Francis Chan called "Crazy Love." Yeah, and I remember reading that book, and that book messed me up. Because I felt like, man, I'm such an imposter. Yeah, seeing like some people doing amazing things for God, and I always felt like I had no story. Sometimes people come to church and give those amazing testimonies, and I'm like, Lord, I feel like I have no story. I just grew up in church and played and been here my whole life. I don't even feel like I have a conversion story. And I remember reading that book. And I was music director for that church for a few years. I was on staff. And I remember thinking, I can't do this anymore. I cannot just come to church, just entertain people, just trying to. And I wasn't even I was just so obsessed with perfection and trying to get the best musicians. I couldn't care if they even served the Lord. I'm like, if you play, you're in. And I remember thinking, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm not just going to come here and play, entertain people, and there's no presence, there's no encounters, there's no story, there's nothing happening. Yeah. I'm done. So I remember going to my pastor, and, we were great friends, amazing guy. But I'm like, look, this is happening. I don't know what it is. I remember telling him, I don't know what God's doing, but all I know is that I can't do this anymore. I'm giving my notice. I'm done. But I thought, I'm just going to go find that church, find that place. And, man, I couldn't find it. Start jumping around, and I just ended up settling in a different church just to go to church, just to say I was going. But that hunger, I'm like, I know what it feels like being hungry for God. Yeah. And once you taste that, you don't want to do normal just to do it, you know. And I never thought it would take me so many years to find my place, but you know, it was probably 3-4 years went by. 2016, me and my wife, we had Benjamin and Olivia, the 2 kids, and we were just done with church, done with Massachusetts, the cold. We just needed to change things. Yeah. So we decided to just pack and go to Florida. We thought maybe we had family in Florida, maybe if we go to a different weather, and let's just shake things up. Yeah. Yeah. I had lived there for 16 years. Sylvia was there her whole life. And we're like, let's just go. So we moved to Florida, found a new church, we were there for 9 months, and things just went from bad to worse. Everything went downhill. And the last thing that could go bad was I lost my job that I transferred from Massachusetts, and that was the last thing that could go wrong, actually, in that whole transition. And I remember my wife used to follow Pastor Mark Castro, that it's part of our family here. And he had also transitioned from where he was, and he just kind of popped up again. And she found his podcast, and he was talking about Apostle Damon Thompson. So she started listening to him. And we were just trying to find our place. We couldn't find our place. Yeah. And she gave me that podcast 2 days after I lost my job, and I was just like, had no idea what to do anymore. Yeah. And it was a wilderness society, just like you, Tyler. Yeah. And I never forget that message. It's wrecked in the wilderness.
Yeah, I remember that one.
That's a great one.
And, man, that message wrecked me. And I remember asking her who, because I never knew about Apostle Damon Thompson, about anything. Never heard of him or anything. But that message hit me so strong. And I was like, who is he? Where's he at? And when can we go see him? And we did some research, found that he was South Carolina. They had a church.
Nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere. You had to do research.
And by the middle of nowhere, we don't mean like, actual, the real middle of nowhere.
And I was like, I had nothing to do. I don't have a job, and I was going to start collecting unemployment, and I'm like, let's just drive there. So there was a Carolina revival 2 weeks after that day, so we packed and drove there. And we didn't know anybody. And driving there in Batesburg freaked me out. I'm like, what is this place? I'm sorry, my friends in South Carolina, but I freaked out. I like, this place stuck in 1950 or something, you know what I mean? And they forgot that people still live here or something. That's good. But as soon as I stepped in the church, it felt like home. It was like crazy, that presence and the worship, and
incredible.
It was just special, man.
Yes,
just special. So we stayed for 2 days, drove back home, and on my way home, I already started thinking, man, I think like that's my place. Yeah. But it was insanity. I had just moved to Florida from Boston. A huge shift of state, life. I had signed a lease for the apartment that I had. And I'm like, I got to go back and check it out. So I started listening to messages, going back on the podcast. And the Lord was just wrecking me. And I decided to go and to the next revival. Was New Year's 2016 to 2017. And I went for that revival, and then there was a wilderness society. I stayed for that one, and that's when the Lord spoke to me. You need to come here. this is your place. Yeah. And it was insanity. I called Sylvia. I'm like, I feel like we're supposed to come. And one thing that's amazing about my wife, I wouldn't have found this place if it wasn't for her. Come on. She's always stayed hungry.
Yeah, love
and
that.
even when I would tell her, she would try to show me messages in other people, and I was just so done. I was just done with church, religion, all that stuff. And I would never listen to her. She would try to listen to this, listen to that. I'm like, no, I'm not interested. And it was even funny. She gave me the first Mark Astor book, and I read the book. It was great. When a misfit,
yes, I love that book.
And she was like, "Oh, what did you think?" I was like, "Oh, he's just trying to find himself." And I was like, and she was like so upset because it was touching her, and I was dismissive about what she was feeling. But when she saw what was happening with me, with going to South Carolina and what the Lord started doing, so I went back home. Came back to visit one more time, and it was crazy. On that trip that I came to try to find an apartment and decide when to come, I was listening to a message on my way there, and the whole message was about worship. And Apostle was talking about the alabaster box and talking about that she didn't need to break the box, but she was just decided to give it all. And how many times we come to church and we just kind of give a little spray, but never really fully break our box. And that, really that message was so important to me. But towards the end of the message, he started talking about basically prophesying about how the worship at Hope Chapel was going to change. Wow. And it was when David started playing the guitar. And then he says this, he's like, I see a saxophone player coming. And when I see him, I will know. And he'll come and he'll start playing, and there'll be no lyrics, and we're going to be worshiping, and the things are going to change, and you better get ready.
I remember that.
And when he said that, the Holy Spirit immediately in the car said, "You are that guy he's talking about." I'm like, but it's funny because in the prophecy he says like, I see like an African American man playing, and then I'm like, when the Holy Spirit said, "You're that guy," I'm like, Lord, I think you know that I'm not that guy, right? No, you're that guy. Yeah. He's not seeing a person. The Holy Spirit told me this. He's not seeing a person. He's hearing a sound. Yeah, and. Just like you guys, I have a heavy influence of gospel music, and it's my sound, it's influenced by that heavily. And I was like, Lord, if you're gonna have to do this, because I'm not gonna do anything. I haven't even decided if I was going to move there or not. But I just kept that in the back of my mind, and the Lord told us to move. I broke my lease. I was on month 11 on my lease. I had 1 month left. I'm like, you know what? I'm out of here. I'm going. Do it. Yeah. Break the lease. Let's go. Yes, packed and left and moved to South Carolina March 2017. And man, my life hasn't been the same since then.
Amazing.
And that's when I connected. Actually, this month, March 1st, 2017 is when I moved. And I even posted a few days ago. I moved on March 1st. March 5th was my first Sunday at Hope Chapel. And still didn't know anyone was there. And Apostle had a word for me and Sylvia. It's like, you there? Yeah. He didn't even know who I was, I was like, Pastor Johnson, put your hands on that gentleman over there. And Sharon, put your hands on that lady next to him. And he's like, for you, it's more of a sense of coming home. Yeah. Transition granted.
It was wild.
And I was wrecked. And it became like a Memorial Day for me, that day. And a few months later, he called me to play out of nowhere. Didn't really know.
You were there for a long time, and we didn't even know that you existed.
Yeah.
That you were there, which is a really cool thing that I've always loved, even just about your personality.
Yes.
And knowing how the musician's personality can sometimes be, which is always like stepping forward.
Yeah.
Or always like, I do this or whatever.
Right.
You sit for months.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't even know how we found out you even played saxophone. But somehow we did. Probably Abba led us there. Anna's story is very much the same, which I'm sure we'll probably get into at some point. But I've always loved that. You were there for a pretty good chunk of time before we even knew.
Yeah. So, I was there for 7 months before I ever played.
Yeah.
I had a one time, actually, I did talk to, eventually I talked to Matt. I gave him a recording of some songs that I wrote. Because God really touched me on that message of the seed when he wrote that song, Weird is Easy.
Weird is Easy.
And, but it was just nothing. One thing that I committed myself was to actually, I wasn't always that person. I was that musician trying to find my place and move things and try to get things done my way.
Yeah.
But the Lord said, you're going to come here and you're going to sit and you're going to serve.
Yes, sir.
And learn to serve. Because I always led, just like you guys, always in leadership position. And I never learned to serve and to follow and just to be under leadership and be, learn. I never learned anything about honor and all those things and order and submission. I always wanted to, I was always kind of a little bit rebellious and trying to force things my way.
Yeah.
So the Lord really wanted to teach me a different way. And so that story of how I started playing was interesting because we had a service, and that was like end of September 2017. I was there for about 8 months. And it was one of those Sunday mornings that was so special that Apostle said, you know what, we're coming back. And I love that he does that when God really moves and he's like, you know what, we need to honor this. We're coming back. And on my way home, I felt like the Holy Spirit said, bring your saxophone. I'm like, Lord, I'm not going to come to Hope Chapel.
I'm not that guy anymore.
I'm going to walk in. How y'all doing?
Who walks in the church with their instrument, right?
I'm ready for what God's about to do.
And I'm like, I'm not doing it. He's like, bring your saxophone. I'm like, I'm not doing it. But it was really strong in my heart to bring my saxophone. But I didn't have the courage to do it. I'm like, Lord, have you ever heard his message about self-promotion or anything like that? But came to service, was in front during worship, and out of nowhere, he comes to me and taps me in my and it's like, you don't happen to have your instrument with you, do you? I think he didn't even know what instrument it was, but like, you don't have it with you, do you? I just opened my eyes and I freaked out. I'm like, no, I don't. I'm so sorry. It's like, okay. He went back to the stage and
wow.
I'm like, all right, Lord, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm like, Lord, I'm sorry that I didn't obey your voice. So I put the saxophone in the car. 2 weeks later, there's a Carolina revival, and there's this moment where he walks in the church trying to find me. He's like, hey, do you have it? I'm like, oh, yes, I have it.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, if you know Apostle Damon, when he wants something, he wants like right away. And like my saxophone was in the car, so I'm like, I go running like crazy. It was parked like far away. I bring it back. It takes forever.
That happened to us again recently.
It happened again, yes. I should have known by now that I need to be ready. I'm sorry. I'm learning. But I go get the saxophone and play, and it was a special day and moment that really changed my life, and that's when me and Tyler really connected. That we played that night for 40-50 minutes, and it was almost like that first entrance into this kind of instrumental. Yeah. Experience we have, and man, it's been 6 years to this month that I've been connected to Apostle Damon.
It's amazing,
and it's been amazing.
Yeah,
been amazing, and then connected to you guys. for you, for me. You guys are like brothers.
Yeah, same.
And I do have, my brother plays. We played together for many, many years. And that's one thing that I missed is playing with him.
Yeah.
My sister also plays, and they live in Massachusetts. And I think was one thing that I think the Lord knew that I needed. And I feel like he gave me that in you, Tyler.
Yeah.
Because just the way we think, it's very similar, and our backgrounds in music are very similar, and kind of reminds me a lot of my brother. And it's special the way the Lord does these things,
Yeah.
So, yeah, man. It's
Well, that's what's fascinating about you two. You two can, basically master an instrument in about 3 days. I'm a one horse kind of guy. Just give me an acoustic guitar. That's what I got. But it's interesting because even like saxophone, piano. I mean, you've played in several. Even since we've been here, played in several different roles. And what's so crazy too, even what you were talking about earlier about like always being in ministry, and I think what I was so jealous for moving here was a time like you guys had. Like you had a year probably before you ever touched
not doing anything
at all.
Yeah.
You had a time.
That period of time was huge.
Yeah, and you had 7 months or so, and how important those times were, and how they shaped the future of what you guys not only did there, but in your spiritual life as a whole. And I never really had that moment. All of my life, because my dad was a drummer. My mom was the worship leader playing piano for 40 years. My sister, my brother ran sound, one of the best sound men in the world. It's like, so we were always doing something, and it wasn't anybody's fault. I felt like it was right. I mean, there was always elements where I was in, and even serving with Pastor Bryn, the first like maybe month and a half, I didn't do anything, but then I gradually. And he never asked me to. Like, it was never like, get up there and do it. Like, it just happened naturally. I believe it was of the Lord. And then even moving here, it was coming from that to here, like to doing something. So I knew that's what was crazy about this transition here is there was a little bit of a period there that was even kind of difficult because I knew the Lord was challenging me some areas, growing me up in some areas. And I was asking of the Lord, like, I need time to process it. And then that's when the wordless came about. Mm-hmm. And when wordless, and when I tell you it was only a month, it's not the 7, it's not the year. But I'm as sure as I'm standing here, it changed my life because I never knew, even in my mind, maybe even subconsciously, how much I associated worship with responsibility. That my worship was not as much, I think it was to a degree, but not as much as I would have wanted it to be, an overflow of my time and my devotion to Abba. And I remember the first service in January and me lifting my hands and going, I don't even know if I know how to do this. I'm usually in that position. And it was the Lord met me in such an amazing way. And even the first time that I led worship out of that in February was in Under the Oaks. And we were doing the Under the Oaks Wilderness Society here, the big 3-day event that we did with Apostle. And I remember the first thing I do, I step up to the mic, and I immediately start crying. And I was completely incapacitated for like 5 minutes. And it was just because I knew like that time was so special. And I think like even connecting all of that to like our journeys, like how important that time of processing what the Lord was doing in our hearts and how He called for certain areas and things to change in our hearts and how important it was. And that's what I love about being with y'all and even being here now is that I feel like I'm finally around people that have those same stories, and you can turn to your brother and go, I don't know what to do here. And you both go, because I remember when you first moved into this house, I've told you this several times, but I was helping you paint upstairs, and you and I were talking and even telling about your journey, like how much that changed my life. And like, I walked away from that going, we're not built to do this alone. We're meant to be connected. And that's why even you saying like, feeling like we're brothers really resonates with me. Cause I felt like it was important being connected to y'all and here.
Yeah. And I think it's one thing that Apostle talks about, is how it's not about making a new sound, or it's not like we're trying to make a new sound. Is that this message of beloved identity is helping us become new men.
Yeah.
And the new man, the new person makes a new sound.
Yeah.
So it's not about pursuing a new sound.
That's
and
good.
it's part of like why I wanted to do this podcast, so we can kind of share and learn together about what this expression is.
Yeah.
What we not that we know a lot, and that's the great thing about this expression as well. We don't know anything.
Yeah.
But I think that's the level of trust in just jumping in the unknown.
Yeah.
And letting the Holy Spirit lead us and the wind lead us. And I feel like that's where the fresh sound comes from. That's where the authenticity comes from, because he's shaping our identity, and that identity is shaping the worship, shaping the sound. That's kind of where I feel like we want to go with this podcast.
Yeah.
And we had a list of things here to do, and then Tyler was like, I think each one of those points are going to be a podcast.
Their own
And actually, he's like,
sure.
he's 100% right, because we just got stuck in our stories. But it's important. The stories are part of what makes us, and gets people to know a little bit more and understand where we're coming from. And Tyler, I saw that you had some things that you wrote down there. Great.
Oh, I write things down to just keep my thoughts solid as we're going along. But no, the one thing that just kind of struck me in the spirit of kind of the main vein of this conversation being just kind of background and stories, I noticed one common denominator in all of our stories, and that was, at some point we all gave a notice.
Yeah.
Because we knew there was more.
That's so good.
We all, at some point, how the journey that led us to that point, it looked different for everybody.
Yeah.
But there was a whisper at some point that said there is more.
Yeah.
And sometimes, even just to encourage people, the thing you have to do is you have to make a decision.
That's it.
When Abba starts whispering these things in your heart. That's right. And these longings in your heart start to, manifest. That I couldn't get past that. That is such a huge part that at some point you're feeling these things, you're sensing these things. Maybe you're becoming uneasy with where you're at, whatever it may be. Like there's, you have to, I've said this for a long time. It's like, I feel like the essence of the kingdom is very practical.
Yeah.
And sometimes to begin to walk kind of a kingdom pneumatic journey, it's just simply you have to start making decisions based upon the whispers that you're hearing from Abba.
Yes. Yep. Agree.
And, so as thankful as we are, as thankful as I am to be where I am today, there was definitely a process getting to this point.
Yes.
That on some days was not easy. I know you can definitely relate to that.
Yep.
But it was unto the whisper.
That's right. Yep.
That is, I know there's more. And I remember that period of my life when I was kind of in that swirl. I mean, I'd done music for over 15 years at that point, nonstop, on stages and platforms and whatever. And I knew that there was more. And I remember walking away from that going, I'll be a greeter at Walmart.
Yes.
And people say that, and it's
true,
whatever,
though.
but like I meant that in the depths of my heart.
Yes, sir.
What I want is more of God.
Yes.
And whatever it takes to get me there, I'm doing it.
That's right.
So you just, sometimes any people that even just might be listening to this first episode that's just fun and conversational, and I'm sure we'll dive in even to that topic a little bit more as time goes on. But that was a common denominator that really struck me from all of our stories. Yeah. Is man, sometimes it just comes down to a decision.
Yeah.
That begins to set you up for where Abba wants to take you and what he wants you to be a part of. And
one thing that and you probably can wrap up. You can give a final thought, each person. But one thing that I've been learning on this journey of following the Spirit and the wind is that the asks get harder, but the answers get faster, or they have to get faster. I feel like deciding to, for me, for example, moving from my home country, it's like a difficult decision. There's so many things that happen. Yeah. After that one, the other ones did get easier in a sense that, moving to a different country, it's a big thing to do, to leave everything behind. But I feel like moving to Florida, there was like, we spent a long time thinking about that one. And then when it was time we felt like the Lord asked us to go to South Carolina, that decision came much faster. Yeah. It took a few months, but it came faster. Yeah. And then we had decided to put our roots in South Carolina. We felt like we're going to be here for life. If that's what the Lord wants, we stay here forever. Yeah. We don't need to do anything else. We are happy. And, we spent a whole year building a house and we're buying land. We're staying here. I wanted to make a point to myself and make a commitment. And as soon as I did that, the Lord, all right, how about you let that go? And the answer came to a week and a half, maybe, But I feel like the more you walk with the Lord, He will ask you for more difficult things. Yeah. But I think as you build that trust, those yeses come easier.
The grace increases.
That's right.
Exactly.
The grace 100%. Increases to say yes. And I think that runs in tandem with the ever-growing awareness of beloved identity.
That's right.
And knowing who you are. Yeah. I think that those decisions become quicker the deeper you get. Those decisions become easier.
That's right.
The deeper you get rooted in that reality. And that's something I'm really excited to dive on in these conversations is the identity factor.
Yes.
Yeah. Because it doesn't matter what we talk about in regards to sound and worship and frequency and expression and all that stuff. It all starts at one place.
That's right.
Every bit of it.
Yep. Yes. I think that was even going to sort of piggyback on my final thought in that regard, was that I think this podcast, and we had this discussion probably, a month or so ago, and I remember saying to y'all, I said, this podcast to me is less about giving a formula to people, like this is how I did it, because
we don't have one.
That's what I was going to say.
If you're here for that, go somewhere else.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't tell you, because if there was a formula, it wouldn't make any sense anyway.
Yeah.
So there's not one, number one. But I remember saying it's less about telling people how we did what we did or how you could, sort of emulate what we do. And I think it's more about letting people know they're not alone. Yeah. That we too have people that I say, it's not to act like, to be more than we are, but people who would watch live stream and go, oh man, I love them. Like how to, go through all these things and think very highly and things like that, to go, listen, we've all had to make decisions just like you would. We've all had to have moments where we sat and we questioned ourselves and we wondered, why do I do what I do? What am I? Who am I? How does all of this make sense? And none of those answers ever came from me becoming more increasingly aware of my ability. They only came from becoming more increasingly aware of who I was in Him. Period. And I tried. I'm telling you right now, I tried, and I can just go ahead and tell you from personal experience, I've tried everything you can. I've tried every roundabout way to get to be in God's presence and His glory and all these things. It's like none of it matters unless you know who you are in Him. Mm-hmm. And that's the key too, is making these decisions. The reason why the decisions have to get faster, and the reason why they are, is because you become more trusting of the Lord. Oh, yeah. You trust that you are in Him and He is in you. And when I make this decision, I cannot fail. Yeah. Because He's with me. Now, I know people say, well, but I have failed. And I say, well, number one, you have to quantify what failing really is. Yeah. It's like, as long as I'm following the whisper, I never fail. Things may happen. Things may not always go as planned. It may be difficulties along the way that may look like failure, but it's not. If I heard the whisper and I make the choice and I make the decision, I'm always going to win, because it makes me go deeper in Him. And the facts are, all of these things that we go through, it's all a part of life. But trust, and then another word that I feel like was really important to me, and then I'll give this back to you, Rudi. Several weeks ago, I was praying in the sanctuary here at the Homestead. And I was going through a journey, like even what my role would be here, more so like even like this new sound, like worship, like things being different than I even different than they were in Kannapolis. And I mean, different for y'all than it was in South Carolina. Yeah. This is not the same. It's a whole new way. And I was having some difficulty. I felt like I was asking the Lord some questions, and I wasn't really getting any answers. And I was in the back corner of the church, and I literally fell to my knees, weeping. And I was like, Lord, I surrender. I can't do this. I surrender, and I yield totally to you. And I felt a grace come and a weight be lifted. And when I stood up, we have a school at the church as well that my oldest and my youngest attend, Legacy Academy. It's been amazing. And Apostle Damon was up front praying. I was in the back, and I felt two hands touch my back. I didn't know who it was. I wasn't turning around because I was just being so wrecked. And Apostle came to me and he's like, do you know who that was? I was like, no, I don't. He was like, it was Lillian, your oldest. Mm-hmm. And the moment I said, I yield and I surrender, that grace came. The generational legacy came in and put her hands on my back. Wow. And it was just a sign from the Lord for me to be like, you're on the right path. I know there's a lot of emotions involved. You've moved your whole family. It can be difficult, but you're in the right place at the right time with the right people. And for those of you who may be listening to this and say, well, I'm not in Alabama. Yeah, but and you may be eventually. I don't know. Or the Lord may be calling you to where you are. But if you know that He is, just trust that He has you exactly where He wants you. And just be close enough to hear the whisper. If you do that, you'll never be too far away.
That's awesome, man. All right, I think that's good for our first episode. I'm so honored to have you guys as friends. I always dreamed about playing music with real friends.
Yeah, same.
That it's more about the depth of the relationship than the quality of the sound.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's special, and I'm so grateful. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And just kind of, even for us to digest what God is doing.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
Thank you, Rudi, for doing this.
Yeah.
Grateful.
And all right, that's it for this first episode. And you can connect with us hopefully soon. We're going to be on YouTube, Encounter Sounds Podcast. We're going to be on all platforms. And let us know. Give us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Till next time.